Want help to grow your business? Download BRiN, the world's first business advisor in your pocket. To find out more, visit BRiN.ai or search the App Store today.
Welcome to another episode of Grow Your Business. I'm your host for today's session, Muffy Churches, and we're going to cover the how-to of performance management conversations. Now, I'll assume that you probably have some sort of a performance management system in place already at work. It might be a formal one, which would be software that you've purchased, or it could be an informal system, and that would mean that you've created some forms and templates that you use, and you've trained your managers up to use those as well. So today in this episode, what we'll be covering is the hands-on, sort of grassroots, daily event of the performance management discussions and conversations that we have, what they look like, feel like, and what they're comprised of. So we'll cover together some very practical points. We'll be looking at how to set objectives. We'll be looking at how to engage ourselves in appraisal meetings. We'll be talking about performance coaching itself. We'll also be talking about providing feedback for others, receiving feedback ourselves, as well as jumping into a very difficult conversation. So let's start with setting objectives. It's going to be probably the best for us to do, I think at this point, is to create a scenario that involves people. We'll call them Phil and Susan. And if I use these two people, I'll build the story around them. I'll be able to walk you through the content, I think, more easily. It'll make more sense to you. I'll be able to give you some examples of what's happening. So let's start with this first topic of setting objectives. Now, I want to create the story of Phil for you. Phil is a CEO of a small business. It's manufacturing products, and he has the manufacturing and the packaging and the delivery all set up off-site. So he doesn't worry about that so much, but he has about 9 to 10 members of staff in the office with him. He's got the normal setup. He has a sales manager and a sales team. He has a CFO and accountants. He's got marketing, and he also has 2 individuals handling customer service on the phones. Now, Phil, from a cultural point of view, business-wise, has been very meticulous about setting up the right sort of a performance management system. He is a small business, but he did decide to purchase some software. He has that set up in place. And he's very interested in making sure that he creates a culture of coaching. And so he's actually put out the expenditure of inviting a corporate trainer in to take himself and his executive team through a program around manager as coach and all the nuances that go behind that. So that gives you a setup of the culture and the business that Phil runs. And now the moment of truth comes now where he's decided that he needs to hire someone new. He needs a service manager to supervise the service team that he's got in place. So he's gone out, of course, and he's interviewed candidates, and he's come up with one young woman we'll call Susan. Susan has worked at a call center. She's never been in a leadership role, though. She wasn't a team leader there, but she enjoyed the job. And she was interviewing for this role with Phil because she's sort of interested in a management role. She wants to dabble with it and see how it works for her. Works for Phil as well, because he has not actually got the budget yet for a high-level, super experienced service manager. And so he thinks that he and Susan could be a good match. He's into coaching, and he thinks he might be able to help coach her through the management and the leadership issues that she might need to enhance as she jumps into her new job. So he hires her, they sign the contracts, and he knows that his first responsibility is to set her objectives. So he's got to go about working out what are the key expectations that he has for Susan in her role. The first thing he will do, and he'll do this before she comes in for her first day at work, the first thing he'll do is he'll set the KPIs. Now, KPI is an acronym that simply means Key Performance Indicator. In order to set those KPIs, he's got to sit down and think quite thoroughly about what it is that she needs to accomplish. Setting KPIs is sometimes a real challenge for individuals, for managers. because they sort of, it's difficult. They think, well, I need her to supervise the team, but beyond that, it's difficult to break it down. So with this in mind, here's a suggestion for the things that you can think about if you're trying to create KPIs. And this is, in fact, the process that Phil took himself through. So the first thing that he did in the center there on this slide that you may see is he stopped to think, what result do I need from her role? What does Susan need to accomplish for this business in terms of our business strategy and Phil's business vision, right? So to answer that question for Susan, the result that he is looking for is a gold standard customer service team. Yep. So off the side of that key result, what would her purpose be? So her purpose would be to supervise the team. It might be to hire new staff members as they grow. He would need her to be present for escalated complaints. So when things don't work well at the first stop, Susan's the one who can deal with them gracefully and create a great resolution to them. He also needs her in place, most importantly, to coach and mentor and train up the service agents to make sure that they can accomplish that gold standard service that they're talking about. As well, he can think about goals. What specific goals might he have for Susan? Now, because she's going to be heading up a service team, the typical goals are things like trying to achieve a particular percentage of first call resolution, or numbers of calls answered when the phone first rang versus it ringing out, or they're put on hold. So those are the sorts of numerical goals that he might have in place for her. So having thought through all of that, Phil's got a nice set of KPIs for her. These are going to be formal. The KPIs will be formal, and they will actually be posted into his software system. So he's got a set of those, and I'd say he will probably have between 5 and 7 key objectives or KPIs in place for her. So when she comes in for the first day, he will walk her through those. Now, there is a second level of work that you can do around setting objectives that you might be interested in, and that is actually creating what I call a coaching document. So as Phil is preparing her KPIs, he may as well take the time to drill down deeper and look at everything that she will need to have in place to be able to perform in this role in an ideal fashion. So the idea is to think, if you were to program a robot or a computer to function in the role, what are all the bits and pieces you would program in to make sure that this person or this robot functioned at the role in an ideal way? So the best way to do this, and you can do this for anyone's role, it's terrific, is just take a piece of paper and divide it into quadrants. And in each quadrant, write one word. The first word, for example, that you'd write at the top of one quadrant would be skills. What are all the skills that Susan will need in this role to perform it well? In the second quadrant, you could put processes. What are all the internal processes that she'll need to know? It might be software that the warehouse uses. It might be an online active website that customers can relate to. And it might be teaching her, making sure that she understands how to use his performance management system as well. So that's skills, processes. Then you've got another quadrant for attitude. Think about what's the mindset that this ideal leader will need in this role, right? What's the attitude and the mindset? And then lastly, knowledge. What level of knowledge will she need to have in place? And that might be around product knowledge, might be around service knowledge and first call resolution, all those sorts of things. So that's what you can do. You can create that sheet, bullet point as many in each quadrant as you can, and use that as a coaching document, which we can talk about in more detail a little bit later. So now let's get back to Phil and Susan. Imagine that it's Susan's first day at work. She pops in and Phil sits down with her and he lays out the paperwork. He shows her the KPIs at some stage and lets her know that these are the key expectations he has for her in her role, and they can discuss each one of the points. She can ask any questions, they can sort of negotiate around things if necessary, but what we're trying to do in this moment is gain her buy-in and a commitment to those KPIs and their appropriateness in terms of loading them into the software because she'll be rated and ranked against them as she starts to work. Great, so that's setting objectives. Now the next thing that Phil will need to do over a period of months as he's working with Susan is he'll be engaged in many different kinds of appraisal meetings. Some appraisal meetings are more formal than others. Some are very informal, some are a combination of the two, and some are strictly formal. So we'll walk through those. An example of a formal appraisal meeting would be what we all know to be the annual review or the quarterly review. Now, because Phil does have software set up in place, he's organized it so that he gets a reminder every quarter to have that quarterly review. So he and Susan will, after she's been at work for a few months, he's got to give her a fair chance. So, at about the 3-month point, they'll probably have their first formal quarterly review appraisal together. And in that appraisal, they'll have a look at those KPIs that they set. He'll rate her against those KPIs in terms of her performance levels and how well she's doing. They'll have a conversation around that, and they'll probably talk about anything they need to in terms of planning, coaching for her or training or anything that she needs to put in place to lift her performance in any particular level. At that meeting, that formal meeting, it's more than likely that Phil will then set up with her a schedule for monthly coaching. Scheduled coaching is another level of appraisal meeting. It's formal only in the sense that it happens on a monthly basis. However, it's informal in terms of its discussion. It's not annotated on the software. It's actually considered a very informal, relaxed, but confidential conversation between a manager and their direct report. So it's formal, yet it's informal. He will probably start that monthly session as soon as she leaves her first formal appraisal. She'll probably have something a week down the track in her calendar that will start her for her monthly coaching sessions. And lastly, we've got what we could call the informal but real-time coaching appraisal meetings. And this is something that happens anytime, all the time. It's not new to businesses, but it's on the uptake right now as we speak. Many organizations are dropping that focus on just the annual.
To continue enjoying this presentation, download BRiN, the world's first business advisor in your pocket. To find out more, visit BRiN.ai or search the App Store today.